Hey, WNOV family, this is Will Martin, and you are listening to a special series. This is Realizing the Dream. We have so many organizations that have stepped up. We all hear Martin Luther King's dream each year. But since then, so much has been done, and we don't talk a lot about that. And so, really grateful to community advocates to be one of the organizations to want to come in and talk about what it has done to help move this community forward and help serve people of all backgrounds since that time. So we're going to get a chance to talk today with Andy Elliott, who is the Chief Executive Officer, Madwala Kirkendall, who is the Chief Operating Officer, and Erica Crowley, and you've got the longest title of the group, Rental Housing Resource Center Director. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's good. And we got everybody in sequence as well, so to make sure that we could address folks. So, I really appreciate the fact that this is an organization, in community advocates, you are really advocating for the whole of the community and making sure that regardless of race or gender or creed, that everyone has an opportunity to be served with dignity. I know that you are also making sure that people have access to basic services. And so I wanted to get a chance to hear from you. I understand the organization was founded in 1976. And we've talked a little bit offline about the founder. And I remember Ramon Wagner. And so welcome to the studio. And thanks for being a major part of our conversation on realizing the dream here in Milwaukee. So, Andy, why don't you kick us off in terms of just saying a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get Madwala, and who's been here before, and then Erica.
All right. Thanks, Will, and thanks for having us here for this program. So my name is Andy Elliott, and I've been with Community Advocates since 1990, and had the honor to work with the founder, Ramon Wagner.
Wonderful. And Madwala?
Yep. So Madwala Kirkendall. I've been with the organization for 25 years and also had the privilege of working directly with Ramon Wagner. So.
Wow. And Erica?
Yep. And I am Erica Crowley. I've been with Community Advocates almost 6 years now.
Yeah, wonderful. Now, I think 5 or 6 years, Ramon would not have been there by then.
Yes, he was not there. I did not have the pleasure of meeting him.
Yeah, he was a very interesting person. Andy, you want to, you and Madwala, do you want to just talk a little bit about Ramon Wagner? I know there'll be listeners who will both know him and remember him in his time. You want to talk a little bit about just who he was and about the organization.
Sure. So Ramon Wagner was a Salvatorian priest, and he came up with this idea for an organization called Community Advocates to really be able to work with the community to help them advocate for their own needs, their basic needs, and making sure that those were met. So he submitted that proposal to the Catholic Church, and they said, "Oh, that's great, but we're not really interested in doing that." So he said, "Okay, well, I'm leaving the priesthood." And he, along with 2 other volunteers, one of them, who turned out to then be his wife, started Community Advocates in 1976, really with that passion, that passion to serve that comes with being from the Catholic Order of the Salvatorians, but really making sure that that they were, working with people side by side, and making sure that not only were they able to address the needs that they came in with, or whatever situation they had, but then they also taught them how to do self-advocacy.
Well, Madwala, you have any just memories or thoughts about having worked with Ramon or?
Yeah, definitely. I think, when we're talking about the series we're talking about here it's that kind of integral into my interaction with Ramon, because when I was 18 or 19 years old, I got into a little trouble and went off to college, got a degree, excellent grades.
Those don't usually go in that sequence.
Right. And I come back to Milwaukee and I apply for 30 to 40 jobs, and no one would hire me because I checked that box.
Mm-hmm.
And Ramon was the first person that gave me an opportunity. And so for me, I was always appreciative of that fact, but then also the fact that while working there, seeing him actually be in the community and work with, individuals of marginalized population, felt comfortable doing that. and actually felt a need to do that for the community. So I've always appreciated that fact about him.
Wow. What has kept you there? I mean, I certainly hear what got you there.
Yeah.
What's kept you there?
It's so funny. I always tell the story that my plan was to be there 6 months because I went off to graduate school and studied school business management. My plan was to go into the school district and do something in the business world. I mean, the business aspect of the school district. And after about 6 months, I realized this is really what I need to do. It didn't feel like work. I was making an impact in the community. It just and just working with at that time a great core group of individuals that I learned a lot from. So it didn't feel like work.
Wow. It didn't feel like work. Now that's something special.
Yeah, no, definitely.
No matter when that happens. And as I understand it, you have something like 40 programs for the organization. I see that it ranges from behavioral health, basic needs. You got the Women's Center as the Milwaukee Women's Center as part of the initiatives there too. It's and you've got a Public Policy Institute. I mean, I'd love to hear more about all these things that you're doing. And I know that we got a special one we're going to talk about, right? But just if you give us kind of the background of, you've got so much going on. How do you, first of all, I don't even know how you keep track of all this. But talk a little bit about what you're offering and how it's helping lift up the community.
Sure. Yeah, so the organization really started again as a basic needs organization, making sure that people had adequate housing and that they had access to making sure that their lights were on, making sure if they had issues related to any benefits that they were receiving, that those would follow through. So the organization started, making sure that people didn't get evicted, didn't have their lights turned off. So that is kind of the core of where everything started. And right now that's still core to what we do. So we have a housing department that works with individuals that are in housing that are having challenges, right?
Mhm.
So the landlord's not making repairs. We have a partnership with the Department of Neighborhood Services to encourage the landlords to make their repairs through the rent abatement and rent withholding program. We also we are one of the energy assistance providers for Milwaukee County, again, making sure that those lights stay on. One of the things that we've added recently is work with the Food Share and Employment Training Program. And that is really, making sure that individuals that are receiving food share have access to training and employment opportunities.
And Food Share is the new name for the old program, the old thing that we called food stamps back in the day.
Yeah.
That's just the fancier new name,
That's
right?
the fancier new name, yes. And again, getting people, that access to training and employment resources to really help them and their families. And then also we do some work for individuals that have a disabling condition and are going through that process of applying for SSI and making sure that, they have an advocate along the way to kind of help them through that process. Anything else in basic needs that I forgot?
Get the core programs.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, what is your mission today? We understand how you started and it's obviously expanded. So what are you about now as community advocates?
It's interesting. It's 40 programs. And as you talked about, there's like these different divisions. So Milwaukee Women's Center has a continuum of services for individuals and families that are experiencing domestic violence. The Public Policy Institute was designed to really be upstream. And then our behavioral health services are for, individuals that, have behavioral health concerns, either experiencing homelessness and really making sure that they're stabilized. The vision, it really, as we kind of like look at everything kind of across the spectrum of what we do, is really nurturing a thriving community. And through these different divisions and these various programs, it's providing support, whether it is somebody that's experiencing domestic violence, has a mental health concern. So not only does the Public Policy Institute look at policy issues, but they're also doing training in the community. They're doing mental health first aid. They are doing suicide prevention.
Wow. I'm already that's already blown my mind. Mental health first aid.
Mental health first aid.
Wow. Okay. And that's amazing. I've not ever heard that that title before.
Yeah, and then really, it's one of the things that, we all, everybody in this room knows somebody that either friend, family member that is experiencing mental illness. I think that's a pretty common occurrence. If somebody is experiencing a crisis situation, that mental health first aid really helps, us or members of the community know how to best engage with that person to keep them safe. So that I'm really proud of being able to offer, through the Public Policy Institute, that training to the community.
Wow, that's incredible. I've never heard that before. Madwala, you're coming up on a very special year. You started in 1976. You weren't there, but came along, right?
I was 1 year old.
Okay, there we go. I'm not even going to say how old I was at that point, but you've got this anniversary coming up, and so, how has this organization grown over these years from, that early beginning where apparently there was Ramon and 2 volunteers, apparently one household worth of people had become at one point. But, how's it grown over these years?
It's grown substantially. When I started, we had roughly 40 staff and maybe 8 to 10 programs at most. And then over the years, we've just and I think this is what we've done well, is identify a need in the community, find a funding source, sometimes not find a funding source, but create a program or services to address those needs. And so again, this is where things have ballooned to the point where they are now. And it's not always about us providing like a benefit to an individual. It may be just providing resources or knowledge about something so that they're not coming back through our doors. And I think, we talk about the ultimate goal for a community advocate would be to have less people come through our doors in need of services.
Yeah. I think that's the thing that I was really excited about when Andy and Deb Hefner and I got a chance to talk, was just that's such a core piece of the mission for WNOV, is to make sure that we're educating our community so that they can be empowered to find and to achieve.
Yes.
And so, just having community advocates as a partner over the course of this year is awesome. And really looking forward to people getting a lot more knowledge about all that. So you're located downtown,
Correct.
right? And do people have to come to that building? First of all, what's in that building? I know I've been down there and I've only made it so far as the lobby. I've not gotten any further. So one of these days, I'm promised that there's going to be a tour. But what all goes on in that building downtown?
Good question. We have a lot going on, actually. So within Community Advocates, our services would consist of our housing department. The Rental Housing Resource Center is there. Our utility department is there. And then our administrative building, our staff are there.
Yeah.
And then the bulk of our housing staff are there for the basic needs services. But then we also have our partners in the building. So we have a Center for Self-Sufficiency.
Okay.
And again, the thought behind, I think the design of the building was, let's bring in, we know we didn't need all the space.
Okay.
Let's bring in partners that do things that we don't do, but people are coming through our doors looking for it. And so that's where the center comes in. Do a lot of reentry work,
Okay.
teen pregnancy work, things of that nature. Legal services. Again, we can only do so much as housing advocates.
Okay.
We can't provide legal advice. So we have legal aid in our building, Legal Aid Society.
Wow.
And so we have attorneys that literally, if someone comes in the Rental Housing Resource Center and we can't assist them, literally like walking across the hall to talk with an attorney to get some assistance for them and get representation.
Beautiful. So, and I know I'm old enough to remember where you started off on Fond du Lac Avenue, and so I understand you still have the building, and that I don't know if that's still used as a service center as well for you.
It is. We actually have a lot of our men's programming there. So we have a Nevermore Batteries Prevention program.
Okay.
We do healthy parenting and things of that nature. The fire program that's funded by Milwaukee County is at that facility. So a lot of that program is there. But then we also have some of our staff that provide services in the community around behavioral health services at that location.
Okay. So we keep talking about housing. We talk about housing like you're not here, right? So I want to make sure we get a chance to talk to you about, Erica. Just give us an idea of what the Housing Resource Center does. What can somebody receive if they come down and end up talking to you?
Yep. So the Rental Housing Resource Center, or we'll just call it the RHRC going forward.
Ooh, okay.
This way you can keep up.
I might
with
have to say the
lingo.
whole thing because I don't know if I can get all those initials down already.
Yep. So the Rental Housing Resource Center is a unique collaboration designed to address the eviction crisis in Milwaukee County. Are you familiar with the book Evicted by Matthew Desmond?
I am.
Okay, good. So in
Yeah.
2016, Matthew Desmond wrote the book Evicted. And in this book, he lived with a couple who were tenants, who were landlords, and he kind of observed their 8 low-income struggling tenants.
Mhm.
So in this book, he describes how eviction is not the cause of poverty, but a symptom of poverty. He talked about how when tenants go through the eviction process,
Yeah.
there's a disruption in their life. He talks about clients in the eviction process go through a sense of instability, while also recognizing that it's a financial burden for the landlords as well. He talks about how when tenants are in the eviction process, they have little to no representation in the legal system. There's a disconnect with the communication between the tenants and the landlords, and that
Ooh, Erica, I'm already tired, and I don't even go into it all. That is amazing.
it's a, yes. I mean, he pointed out a lot of different things. But the most important one I want to mention is that 50 to 80% of a client's income is going towards their rent. So
Okay.
in the event that they have a financial setback, they're going to fall into the trap of eviction. So at the Rental Housing Resource Center, we are the solution to the challenges that Matthew Desmond addressed in his book.
Wow. So you have people who have not enough to cover, certainly not enough to cover everything that they've got, but there's so much of their money going to housing
Right.
that if that goes wrong, they've really lost out on everything.
Absolutely.
It just becomes to untether the whole thing.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, wow. That's so, Manuela, can you kind of talk about, like, in the context of the organization, where does housing fit?
Housing is the core of everything we do. I mean, if you don't have stable housing, we can't address your behavioral health issues. We can't address all these other
Okay.
potential barriers that you may face. And again, if I'm worried about if I'm going to have a home, I'm not going to be thinking about my lights or my light bill. I'm not going to be thinking about what's happening with my kid at school.
Well, it's hard to keep a job or get a job.
Yes. And so that's where when someone comes to our doors, the first thing we're doing is assessing for housing to figure out where the barriers may be, what the needs are, and getting them stable there.
Yeah.
And then we start to talk about all those other things, whether it be employment, energy assistance. I'm really trying to, provide a wraparound services when,
Wow.
quote unquote wraparound service, but we really do within the organization have the ability to provide those wraparound services.
That's amazing. And it's so fundamental to have an address, right? Because I just rented a car and I didn't know anybody else in town, and they wanted to know, well, what's the emergency number? Who's your emergency contact in town? If, because I'm taking this car of theirs. I was like, I don't have
Mhm.
an address. I don't have a contact here, right? But we couldn't go forward until I literally gave them something. And so the idea that, it makes perfect sense why you wouldn't be able to really perfect the services until you really got a place for someone to be, right, in that. And so I understand that we're going to take a little break. We had a little bit more time. That this is the thing about trying to make sure that we don't overstep the sound engineer here, right? But just that fundamental need for an address, because how do you get someone medications if you don't have that address? How do you make sure, like, where you're going to have the meeting with this person if they don't show up?
Exactly. Yeah. And the other, the big part for us was, thinking about the children that are being impacted by this. We can always, people are quick to say, oh, it's the mom's fault, or, she put herself in a situation, but we still have kids that we need to think about that are going to come up. We want this to become normalized, eviction shelters become normalized.
Right.
And then we also want to think about the impact it has on the child when he goes to school, or if he's changing schools 2 or 3 times a year.
Right.
So again, without creating that housing stability, there's all these other factors that come into play that we don't think about that impacts poverty in the long
Right.
run.
And absolutely continues that string of events that are ending up causing people to be in a bad situation.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow. And let's not leave out the fathers.
Correct.
We can't talk about the mothers without there being fathers in this situation as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we've also, I think you bring up a good point. 10 years ago, we didn't talk about fathers.
Mhm.
And over the last 3 to 5 years, we're seeing more fathers with custody of their children coming
Wow.
through our doors. I mean, we're trying to shift programming to adjust to that, whether it be at our shelter, whether it be individuals coming in. Because, when the mom comes in, we don't ask, do you have custody of your child? we just assume.
Wow.
Dad comes in, you have custody, where's your paperwork at? So we've gotten away from that mindset, but it's definitely been a paradigm shift in terms of the people that we're seeing and dads coming in with their children.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we're going to continue this part of the conversation right after a break.
What's the difference between me and you?
Hey, WNOV family, this is Will Martin, and you're listening to a special series, Realizing the Dream, and I'm here with Community Advocates, one of our community partners, to talk about, the advancements we've made in this community, as well as how they're helping people today to make sure that folks can get the service. We were just talking before the break of just how integral housing is, and you've got your Housing Resource Center. I can't say all those letters you've got going on. I need to work down there a little bit more before I can get all that down. But, for folks that are maybe on the bubble, they're spending, we've got so many families in this community. We're spending, the federal government says that 30% or less should be ideally what you're spending on housing, 30% or less of your income. And yet we've got people in this community, and sometimes who are spending 50% of their income, sometimes more, for housing, especially under these double-digit rent increases that we've experienced through the inflation. How are you helping stabilize families to be able to stay in their homes when they get behind?
So one of the unique things about the Rental Housing Resource Center is that we have triage specialists. So when people come into our center, the first thing we're going to do is assess their whole household. So although we're looking for the housing instability, we're asking about, okay, what's going on with your utilities? What's going on with the kids in the household? Do you need access to food? So we're going to do a full assessment as to what's going on in the household. And based off the information that we receive, it allows us to make the referrals to the necessary either in-house programs that we have, or make a referral to those that we partner up with.
Okay. Well, you mentioned about the utilities,
Mhm.
and I know, Andy, you mentioned as well about having, that was one of those basic needs. And certainly, we've experienced it these days. We can get some below zero days and nights in Wisconsin, and we can get some really hot days, sometimes into the 90s. How do we make sure that families who come in and they're having difficulty struggling to keep their housing are likely to also be the same people who are struggling to keep their utilities on? How do you do that? How do you make sure? You talked about the triage.
Yep. So the great thing about the housing triage specialist is as soon as they come in, and it's also great to have the utility services in the same building as us, because we're sometimes looking at the same information that's needed. So you're sitting here telling us about your housing issue, but also a utility issue. As soon as we're done, I'm just going to walk you over to Energy and say, sign in if you have the ability and time to wait, and see how a utility specialist and get your energy done within the same day.
So I can go in one building and you guys can handle my situation right there.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, beautiful. Well, you've got so many other programs. How do you coordinate all this? Again, a family that's in crisis, they don't necessarily know everything that they need. How's that all coming together?
Yeah, and I think that's what's always been key. Somebody's coming in like in a crisis situation, and we've all been in crisis situations, right? So you really need somebody to just kind of help kind of bring you down and kind of like address your main concern.
Mm-hmm.
But then in addition to that, our staff are trained to kind of also say, okay, you know, you came in for this, like, let's take a look at the other things that are potentially causing some challenges in your life. And so, you know, we're kind of resolving that crisis and then taking a look, like Erica said, kind of doing that overall assessment of what other support we can give to you and your family, and what connections within Community Advocates we can refer you to. And then if it is a situation where the family may need like an external referral, then we would do that as well, making sure that we're kind of taking a look at the whole person and that whole family and what connections they need. And, you know, I think having the ability to work collaboratively with the different programs.
Yeah.
One situation that, you know, it was, you know, it just kind of like reinforced kind of the interconnectedness of the work that we do. We had an individual that came in for the Food Share Employment and Training Program, and during that process, it was identified that she was also experiencing domestic violence.
Oh, wow.
So we made a connection with our Milwaukee Women's Center to make sure that she and her family were safe, because, again, housing is core. But if you are afraid to go back to your house because you or your children, that's the so making sure that we made that, you know, a quality, you know, a referral, a warm handoff to the Milwaukee Women's Center, got that person stable, and then we can work with them, you know, to deal with, you know, getting into safer housing, and then continuing that work on either getting into a training or an employment situation.
Well, it's just, you know, I think about this, the trauma of, you know, not just the adult that's going through all of this happening, but then the trauma that the kids experience going through, and then not having that stability. And you talk about fear, just, you know, it's a little hard to go through and go to school or go to work if you're just constantly afraid of the next thing that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And also, you know, I assume that part of this too is about not just helping, you know, sort of calm them down at one point in time for the service, but how do you help keep them calm through what they're experiencing?
We develop individualized case plans for families. And again, as Erica mentioned, again, we always have this approach. We're going to work with mom,
Yeah.
but we've kind of shifted to doing that multi-generational approach to our services. And then we're looking to address the issues or concerns that the mom have, but also with the children. And that's where we can provide mentorship and things of that nature. But within our Milwaukee Women's Center division, we have a program specifically for the children that may have experienced witnessing their parent be abused. And we have children's programming. We have staff that are specifically trained to work with those children to address some of the trauma that's been inflicted in their lives.
And the idea of safety is just so, you know, so profound, and just helping them understand that they are safe.
And
Certainly
it's not
with
their
them
fault.
with you. Okay, talk a little bit about
Yeah,
about
I mean, you think, you know, oftentimes the children come in there and you know, hearing the arguments, the things that go back and forth, and they always, you know, they start to assume, they go, what am I doing wrong?
Mhm.
And you hear that oftentimes when our, you know, our staff work with the children.
Wow.
We also, you know, have youth focused safety plans to kind of talk about, you know, just bringing it down to their levels. I think the other thing we do well at Community Advocates is, you know, they talk about meeting people where they're at. You know, we hear people talk about that, but are you really doing that? And so even with that programming, like just kind of bringing it down to a level where they understand, where we can get the best outcome from that conversation.
Wow. You know, so, you know, again, you're doing so much for so many folks. When you were doing these programs, were you even finding all the staff to come in and help you? I mean, in this economy, you've grown all these programs. Where are you getting all the people to be able to come in and do all these professional services?
Wow, that's a good question. You know, it's interesting. So the organization started with the 3 volunteers, and now we have about 155 people. Recently, we had our all staff meeting. We had staff talk about like how long they've been with the organization, and I think it really speaks to kind of the passion that people have for the mission of Community Advocates, and that we have people that are staying for a long time. So I think that we have kind of a core group of staff that have been here probably at least 10 years or longer. And then we are also like bringing on like younger generation, and actually also people that are, this is like their second career. So really kind of like having appealing to kind of that core of people that have been here for a long time, bringing on people that are new to the workforce, but then also people that, again, this is like their second career.
This is their passion job now.
Yes, yes.
After they finished. And I love the fact that you have such a diverse workforce as well, and a diverse management team as well. It's again, as we think about, realizing the dream, some of those very important principles that Martin Luther King talked about in terms of judging people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. And your organization has done an incredible job of making sure that it represents all the people who are in Milwaukee County, not just one group or another. And so I laud you for the fact that you really have lived the dream there at your organization as well.
Yeah, and I think another key to that is again the premise that Ramon instilled in Madwell and I is really serving people with dignity and respect. I mean, we are grounded in that, and making sure that the people that we serve feel that when they come in.
That's beautiful. So when we talk about you're now reaching your anniversary year is coming up. I imagine this is kind of the run up to celebrating, right? Which always makes me think of food, by the way. So I'm looking forward to whatever you all are going to be doing that will involve food in this process. But I know that you're also really engaging the community as you think about the future, as you think about what you want to be doing. How do people get in touch with you? How do people get involved with the organization?
Yeah, we do a lot of work in the community. So we're doing a lot of, again, resource fairs and like getting the word out about the work that we do. Again, part of what we are, the premise behind Community Advocates, and Manuela alluded to this earlier, is like there's like a need comes up in the community, and then we like work to kind of like come up with a solution. And so one of our premises is the nothing about us without us. So really hearing from the community what they're seeing and what needs to be, what is like an evolving issue that needs attention.
Well, wait, I want you to say that again, because it's profound, and I don't want to just miss it. But
and I didn't invent it. I grabbed it from somebody else.
That's okay if you just live in it. That's all right too. It's
the nothing about us without us. And I can talk about one of our projects that we're doing recently is, we've seen an increased number of older adults that are experiencing street homelessness, which is not okay, right? I mean, we as a society, we all know that that's not okay. So we embarked last year on some work to interview older adults that are experiencing homelessness, just to find out like what led them here. And then not only like what led them to this situation that they're in, but what is it what do you envision as appropriate housing for you? Because again, we don't know. We see it as an emerging issue. So we want to hear from the people that are experiencing that. And not only like what were the things, what changes need to be made to kind of stop that process from happening, but what do you see as a solution for you in your community? Because we also, theorize that older adults, if they were put into an apartment by themselves, they would be housed, but they would also be isolated. And that isolation is just as devastating as, potentially being on the street. So what are solutions that they see as that we can help to present and move forward?
Well, and is this some of the work that the Public Policy Institute does as well?
Yes. In fact, right now we have a grant from the Healthier Wisconsin program, a seed grant to further do that research, to interview older adults over 50, to find out what it is, again, what led them here, what barriers did they experience while they're experiencing homelessness, and then what do they see as a solution?
It strikes me that your organization is not just meeting basic needs, but understanding why those basic needs exist, and then coming up with policies and policy recommendations to actually try to avoid that happening for folks.
Yes. Yeah. And again, that was why the Public Policy Institute was created. Like looking at, what policy changes could be made to prevent people from coming in the door.
Wow. So, Erica, we talked a little bit earlier about, your Housing Resource Center. How do people get in touch with you if they have a need, or if they just want to talk to somebody about, they're stressed, maybe they're not homeless yet, but housing insecure.
Mhm.
How do they engage with you and your team?
I always say the best thing to do is to come into the office. We
Okay.
are located downtown, 728 North James Level Street. We take walk-ins 9 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Where is that again?
728 North James Level Street,
Okay. And what time again?
9 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Okay. Beautiful. All right. And so they can just come down, and then what do I say when I get there?
So again, that's the best way to come down is to come down to see us. But also there are some people that are not mobile, so they can always give us a call at 414-895-7368.
Wait, what was that number again?
414-895-7368 or 414-895-RENT.
Okay. All right. Well, that'll help me.
More words, right?
There we go. Wait, I got the rent part.
Right.
I never forgot the
But
rent
if,
part.
if a client comes in, the first thing they're going to do is stop at the front desk and say, hey, I'm having a housing issue, or I have housing questions, or I need help with my arrears that I owe the landlord. What's the process, or what's the next step?
Okay. And do you recommend, I assume you recommend don't wait until you got the 5-day eviction notice in your hand. Certainly come if you got it, but come before
So
then.
we want our clients to definitely be proactive. Our goal is the rental housing resource center overall goal is eviction diversion.
Mhm.
And that's helping clients stay out of eviction court, or if they're
Okay.
already in eviction court, how do we help them navigate that process with the necessary resources and financial assistance to get them out that process.
So this is about getting here as soon as possible, as early as possible in the problem. If the-
Absolutely.
I got a friend who says problems do not age well, right? So don't wait. Come down and see you. Call
Mhm.
before it becomes the next stage of the problem.
Right, because we want to prevent you to getting that official eviction notice. You getting a 5-day notice, that's like key to like, okay, I got a 5-day notice. Let me see what resources are available to me, and let me see who can help help me with the process.
Oh, and of course, that's going to turn into another problem, because once you got into eviction court, now there's a record, and that's going to impact your ability to get your next place.
Absolutely.
Because they're going to check to see if you're on that list. What else can you do for folks? When we're talking about housing, is there anything you do with the kids at all? Are you helping people find a new place, or is it really much more preserving where they're at right now? Or
So we don't help with kids directly. More of our services will be indirectly, which would be helping that family, again, have that housing stability.
Mhm.
We do work with landlords that do have housing lists. So if
Okay.
someone is saying, I just want to move, I'm not in the best neighborhood, or my lease is up and my landlord is selling the house, do you guys know any landlords? We do. We have weekly listings.
Okay.
We have direct access to a few landlords, and we can help a client get placed.
Beautiful. So you actually it's not just about trying to keep them in a place, even if it's not a great place. It really is about trying to get them to the right place.
To the right place,
Oh,
absolutely.
that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So I know you also have got, a future. You talked about wanting to make sure the community is engaged and that they're a part of the conversation of what the organization does. That what they need is a reflection of what the organization does. So really, in terms of the future, how are you going to go about figuring out what else is missing, what else is needed? Does the community have anything to say about, like, hey, how are these programs going right now? What else do I need?
Yes, I mean, and I think that part of what we do is, just getting, when people come and, access one of our programs, it's kind of like that satisfaction survey. So
Mhm.
those are
Okay.
always, extremely helpful. Either, yes, you met my needs, or no, you didn't, or you did, but I have this other issue. So
Mhm.
really like I know a lot of times for me, like if I'm asked to do a survey, I'm like, oh, another survey. But we really need that. I mean, we really need to get the input from the people that we're surveying on whether or not, you know, our services met their needs, or if there's something over and above that that we're missing.
Yeah.
Because that's how we work on this, you know, this process of, again, meeting the needs of the community that maybe we're not.
Wow. You know, you talked about earlier just sort of having that one-stop shop concept and having, you know, folks from reentry. And just to be clear, reentry is, of course, I would ask, reentry from what? This is folks that are coming back from incarceration, right?
Right.
They've either been at the county jail or they've been in the state jails, and they're coming back to this community, right? And so, you know, once again, they have all sorts of housing and economic issues in trying to reintegrate back into the community. You know, how do you work with your partners? You know, if everybody's doing their thing, and it's great they're all in one place, but is there some kind of way that you're bringing all that together so that people? It sounds like you can walk me around, but do you know, as these other organizations change, what the changes are that they're having? So that you've got a better sense of where to send people in the building, or if you need to send them out.
So I will say one thing with it's all about partnership, right? You got to have relationships with your partners. So there's a lot of meetings that we're having. There's a lot of let's go for lunch. There's a lot of let's go for tea or coffee just to talk about what's
Nobody
going
called
on.
me for the lunches.
Well, next time I call you, okay?
Thank you. Thank
Next
you.
time
I feel
call
left
you.
out on this so far.
But I think a lot of what we do is as we maintain our partnership is that we just build relationships. And even though they're our partners, at some point they kind of become like family and friends.
Okay.
And again, we have monthly meetings. We meet quarterly. We talk about what's going on with your organization, what new services you have. This is what's going on at Community Advocates. This is what we have in the RHRC.
So it's an active partnership,
Mhm.
because I think there's so many people who say partnership in Milwaukee. What they really mean is you gave me a letter, you know, or I'm gonna say it, you're gonna say it, and then we're done with it. And so this sounds like it's a very different level of
No,
partnership.
Our partnership is very much involved. The partners with the RHRC, so that's like our legal aspect, mediation, city, county, justice center. We meet on a regular. We are always going out for tea or lunch.
Yeah, here we go again. You know, I'm gonna get my name on the list, Andy, so that I can be called for this lunch. I just want to be able to sit there and have my food and listen to.
Yeah.
But well, you look like you got something to say
Yeah.
about.
And then we talk about partnership again. Like, we want people to have skin in the game, and so oftentimes, like you said, it's a letter. We have this rubber stamp that we're partners, but there was no real partnership. And so we have
Mhm.
Mediate Wisconsin. Like, we get overwhelmed with phone calls. Like, we're limited staff in our rental housing resource center. Hey, we got 1,000 calls. Can you guys take some? And they take the calls. They assist. And so that's the type of partnership we want. Like,
Okay.
we need you to come into the building and maybe staff the rental housing resource center for an hour or two. Like, we want those types of partners, and,
Well-
and it actually happens.
Oh, that's beautiful. Now, look, I could answer a phone or two if I got invited to the lunch.
I'll give you
We
a
got
script.
Okay, thank you, thank you. I'm just saying, like, you let me sit down somewhere, and as long as I can have my lunch, I'm good. So, you know, what's the future for the organization? You know, you're kind of getting up in age these years. Not you individually, the organization, right? But what's next for you? What's next for the organization?
I think Andy hit on the fact that we're definitely excited about the new leadership coming, the staff that are coming on board. We
Okay.
have great leadership. Erica, again, she mentioned being here for 6 years. Great talent like that coming on board. You know, and the future looks bright for Community Advocates. We also, I think over the last couple of years, even we talk about our clientele and being, you know, good stewards of the services, but also with 150 staff, Andy and I and the board want to make sure we're doing right by the staff. And so we're looking at, what are we doing? You know, are we providing with the right tools, the connections? You know, you talk about pay in this economy. We're just looking at all those things and make sure that, you know, while we're again addressing the community needs, we're addressing the needs of our staff. And so,
Mhm.
like, for us, that's kind of at the forefront of like what the future looks like.
Wow, Andy, any thoughts about?
Yeah, I mean, and like Manuela said, you know, the staff are what makes the magic happen, right? So making sure that they have the tools, the training, the access to what they need to best serve the community, because we work for the staff who then work for the community,
Mhm.
right? And then making sure that we are, you know, the programs that we've had for, almost 50 years are still meeting those needs. And then, always keeping, our ear open to the community so that we know like what the issues are that are coming up, focused on, and then helping, to move those solutions forward.
So let me just ask you, do you serve across the county? Or is it a certain part of the county?
Yep. We are Milwaukee County wide.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And some of our programs through the Public Policy Institute actually do some work statewide. And again, that's about that opioid use prevention
Okay.
and just like really getting those messages out throughout the state as well.
Wow. And in terms of, people wanting to volunteer, do you have volunteer opportunities for people to come on down or?
We have volunteer opportunities, and that really centers around the Milwaukee Women's Center.
Okay.
So we have a volunteer coordinator named Jerry Kavanaugh. And I don't have her number in my head.
Well, that's
Um,
okay. That's okay. But what is your general number? I'm sure if we can get folks over there.
Yep. So the general number is 414-449-4777.
Okay. And what is that number again?
It is 414-449-4777.
Okay. And that's not the rent number.
It's
That's
not the rent number.
definitely not
That
the
is
rent
not the
number.
different number.
That's a different number. Okay. And so people can call there. And if they really wanted to volunteer to help some of these families be able to get back on their feet, or if they're struggling with issues of domestic violence, wanting to help make that family more resilient or support them in that effort, they can volunteer.
Yes, definitely.
And of course, people can always donate. I'm sure they can donate.
They can always donate. Yes.
So, obviously you can take money, right? Everybody can take legal tender.
Yes.
But are there other things that you need or that people might have that would be of use to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing that is really helpful is not only do we have the Milwaukee Women's Center shelter that houses up to 60 individuals on any given night. We also have the Autumn West Safe Haven that is a facility for 20 individuals, and we are always welcoming people to prepare food and serve meals
Mm-hmm.
for either the Milwaukee Women's Center or the Autumn West Safe Haven.
Yeah. Well, do you even, with that many beds, do you end up needing bedding for those folks or other things of that nature?
We do, and what we also like to do is when a family comes to the shelter and then moves on, is to be able to like give them that bedding to take with them.
Okay.
So that's towels and bedding, so that they can use it while they're in the shelter and then take it with them.
Oh,
and pillows,
awesome.
Pillows, having a nice fresh pillow, fresh towels, and fresh sheets. It does a world of good.
Wow. So people, could actually donate towels and those sorts of things to you
Yes.
as a part of that. So, I think about it as tithing,
okay.
so being able to get people to, as you're getting new towels for your home, buy another towel, right?
Mhm.
And donate that one over to you, or buy enough that would match so that the family can leave the shelter with something to get them started.
Yeah.
And I'm here you with the pillows, right?
Yes.
And of course, we're coming right out of that season when having a comforter is really important because these swings in the temperature and that sort of thing. So, anything else that people can do to be helpful to you?
Service projects are really nice too.
What's a service project?
If they want to come into our shelter and paint a couple rooms,
Okay.
there's exterior painting, there's yard work, there's just a bunch of stuff at either the Safe Haven or at the shelter where there's we have fraternities that come in that do a
Okay.
lot of work with us, sororities that have come in,
Okay.
church groups. Again, coming in the organization and providing. For us, again, we're paying money for it. So if they're able to come and do something that we're paying money for, that's a huge donation for us as well.
Right.
We
Yeah,
can ship
just being able to save that money
Yes.
for really some of
Somebody
these other
else.
needs.
Exactly.
Wow, that is incredible. So yeah, I was just thinking about the fraternities and sororities,
Mhm.
churches, great ways, and getting some of these civic organizations too to think about this. There's nothing wrong with getting Rotary and some of these other organizations to decide to come out and help you too.
Definitely. We're always interested in individuals want to come through and do a tour of the facilities, taking them through just to kind of see what we're doing, see the great work that our staff are doing. So
I'm doing mine during lunch. I do my tour during lunch.
yes, you come to the shelter. We have a cook actually who provides meals, so it'll be you can come and get one of the meals.
Okay, that's right. You know, Jermaine and I were talking earlier about, you know, it's always the right time for ribs and rib tips. So, you know, yeah, so we got to make absolutely sure that we
Right.
check what the menu is going to be around that
Yes,
time.
yes. I mean,
But-
and talk about, we always talk about culturally competent services, even on the food level. So we have a cook that was a chef at Coffee Makes You Black.
Okay.
So he's the cook at our facility, at
Okay.
our shelter. So again, we provide, we dignity and respect, we're just providing that service.
So you're getting comfort food as well.
Yes, exactly.
That is beautiful. So again, in terms of people, if they're looking for the service, if they're in crisis, if they're in need, what do they do?
Again, the best thing they can do is come into the office.
Okay. Well, and what happens if I'm in crisis and it's after the hours? We'll go, wait. By the way, what are those hours again?
For the Rental Housing Resource Center, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Okay. And how long is the building overall open?
I believe from 8 to 5.
Okay.
We
All
have
right.
staff there as early as 8 a.m.
And it's on the bus line?
It is on the bus line.
All right. And so, and if I have a crisis after the hour?
If there's a domestic violence crisis, after we have a hotline, it's 24/7.
Okay.
414-671-6140.
We'll say that number again. I was still on those ribs. So
414-671-6140.
beautiful. We're going to come right back to this conversation right after this break. You are listening to Will Martin, and we have a special series that we've been doing, Realizing the Dream. You know, it's not just about the speech from Martin Luther King, which was incredibly important, but it's also about what are we doing since then, and the idea of having really amazing organizations, private sector, public sector, who are doing great things to help us advance here. And so Community Advocates has just been wonderful to come in as our partner, talk about what they're doing to make sure to make this a much more equitable society, a much more equitable community. And so I know, Erica, you've got something special that prior clients can get in on right now.
So one thing I do want to highlight that in the Rental Housing Resource Center, or the RHRC,
Woo.
we are offering a $25 gift card for anyone that does our Client Spotlight initiative. You can find this information on our Facebook page, our Instagram page, which will be Rental Housing Resource Center. We're just looking for clients who have both a negative or positive experience with the Rental Housing Resource Center or any of our partners. So that's Community Advocates, Legal Action, Legal Aid, Mediate Wisconsin. So just fill out the survey, submit a 1 to 2 minute video, and then we'll give you a $25 gift card of your choice.
Wow. Okay. And if I want more information about that, I call.
You can give us a call at 414-895-7368. But really follow our Facebook page.
Okay. So, and if I don't have Facebook,
Then give us a call.
thank you.
Or come into the office. Come into the office. We do have the information in the office as
Oh,
well.
beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So, as we close, just some last thoughts about, who Community Advocates is
Mhm.
and who does it continue to be?
Yeah. So, we're here to further Ramon's mission of, serving the community and making sure that they have access to basic needs and are served with dignity and respect. And that is what we are looking to continue to do in our next 50 years, if that's what it takes to make sure that this community is served. And so I guess I would ask that as you come in, let us know, kind of like Erica said, what we're doing right and what areas we're missing, so that we can help to serve you.
Yeah. Manuela, what are you thinking? What's your final thoughts about who Community Advocates is and who it's becoming?
Yeah, we're for the community. We're here to assist the community, and I think just moving us as a community forward, whether you're, again, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would say, whether regardless of your race, color, creed, we want to make sure as a community we all move forward.
And move forward in dignity. Well, all right then. Thank you so much for coming in, and WNLV family, thank you for listening.